In this Reverie Knights Tactics gameplay and features overview, I'm going to go through the story and impactful choices you'll be making, the intricate combat mechanics, and the heroes who will fight alongside you in this tactical turn-based RPG. The game was developed by 40 Giants Entertainment and published by 1C Entertainment. Reverie Knights Tactics will be released on PC via Steam, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch tomorrow on January 25th. This is a sponsored post. Please note sponsored posts are only sponsoring coverage. Our opinions on the game are our own and not affected by any business relationships with developers or publishers. Reverie Knights Tactics is an isometric tactical turn-based RPG where the choices you make affect the story and characters involved. The outcome of your decisions changes the tide of narrative and gameplay because it affects your moral alignment, similar to how it would in King Arthur Knight's Tale, for example. However, what makes Reverie Knights Tactics stand out is its combat. Not only are your positioning skills put to the test, but you also have to develop your environmental acuity to take advantage of the battlefield, much like in Divinity Original Sin 2. Moreover, you'll find out how quickly the difficulty ramps up after an encounter or two, which pushes you to be very strategic in terms of what you should do next. Will you use a potion to heal your main character at the cost of foregoing your next attack, or will you instead damage several opponents using spike flowers without restoring your HP? Reverie Knights Tactics features 4 playable heroes, 3 of whom you'll meet through exploration, character customization, highly interactive and varied battle phases, 2 difficulty modes, and the looting and crafting system. Reverie Knights Tactics is set in the continent of Lamnor. You embark on a series of adventures in the hopes of saving your father from the hobgoblins who continue to ravage the once glorious elven city of Lenorian. Initially, playing as the main character Aurora, you'll encounter other heroes who will join your cause, such as Brigandine, Friend, and Helaron. What's interesting is that each of them has unique personalities, skills, and playstyles to offer, which can tip the odds of combat in your favor if used correctly. Aurora is a mage who is able to deal damage at melee and range distances while disabling enemies, but doing so quickly depletes her mana as well. On the other hand, her best friend Brigandine acts like a tank in that she's able to taunt targets and remove the status effects of her allies provided that they're near her. The latter point is huge given that these negative effects accelerate a character's undoing. The seemingly brash Friend can charm an enemy to fight alongside him for one turn or make them bleed. Meanwhile, the loyal Helaron is a healer and support hero who can cure and restore an ally's HP while removing their status effects. He's also able to conjure a copy of himself to distract enemies. These are just some of the things that heroes can do. The skills they have aren't limited to the ones I mentioned since you'll be unlocking more as you'll level up. Furthermore, having them around makes the exploration aspect of the game varied and interesting. You not only learn who they are and how they think, but you also get to capitalize on their strengths, which turns combat into an engaging and exciting experience. Reverie Knights Tactics boasts fantastic hand-drawn, cel-shaded textures in terms of its landscapes, characters, and overall environment. As such, the visuals beautifully capture the magic behind the fantastic world of Lamnor, from the thorough details behind each encounter to the artistic style of every character and creature you meet. It's certainly impressive to see 40 Giants Entertainment make use of rich and bright colors to bring the story and fantasy theme of the game to life. In terms of audio, Reverie Knights Tactics does offer decent soundtracks, however these are limited. There's not much variety in the music that you hear from one counter to the next or even outside of combat, so it tends to be repetitive after a short period of time. But this isn't the case for sound effects, which I enjoy listening to. Every skill of the hero sounds distinct and weighty. In fact, the enemies themselves are differentiated by the attacks they execute. In Reverie Knights Tactics, the choices you make will align with Aurora's chaotic or orderly nature, affecting the narrative as well as how the other heroes will react to her. If she's more chaotic by selecting rash options that may cause harm, then they'll think of her as either courageous or impulsive. But if Aurora adheres towards order by choosing logical reasoning as opposed to emotional ones, then her companions will either warm up to her or judge her as a pushover. Moreover, these choices could negatively impact everyone. For instance, there was one situation where due to Aurora's certain alignment, she was able to disarm a trap. As such, the party left the scene unscathed. Had her disposition been different, this could have led to the start of an encounter. This is simply one example of what may have happened depending on who Aurora ends up becoming. Is she going to be a rational individual, or will she succumb to her dangerous impulses? When it comes to the game's exploration aspect, it's rather straightforward. You won't be looking over your characters while directing them here and there to move from one location to the next. Instead, you have to select specific points of interest that serve as ways to progress in quests. Think of it as traversing an overworld map. When the party arrives at their destination, they'll have a small discussion about the place and then decide what needs to be done. Sometimes you'll engage in mini-quests like lockpicking to find out the contents of locked chests and to progress the narrative. Exploration in Reverie Knights Tactics isn't that extensive, so don't expect to see sprawling vistas when you're traveling in Lamnor. In the game, you'll be managing 4 heroes in terms of their attributes, skills, and equipment. There are only 3 attributes to invest in, namely Might, Finesse, and Defense. Might improves your overall damage as well as the effectiveness of certain skills, whereas Finesse enhances your chances of dealing critical damage and taking glancing attacks, which lessens incoming damage by half. And finally, defense also reduces the damage you receive while boosting your resistances against status effects. Note that the decisions you make in this game extend beyond the scenarios I previously mentioned. They also affect the available skills you can select every time you level up. If you have fully oriented yourself towards one moral alignment, you'll be presented with either chaotic or orderly skills. It all depends on what you choose to become. Lastly, the gear you equip raises your attributes or stats such as HP and mana, thereby improving survivability while increasing the number of times you can activate some skills. Combat is where Reverie Knights Tactics shines the most due to the strategies you have to employ. Every encounter may feel punishing until you fully understand how to utilize optimal positioning, environmental hazards and obstacles, and your skills. At earlier levels, you'll often have to retry the battle if you make a single mistake, as they will probably lead to your downfall. For instance, if you trudge along the arena filled with destructive monsters, you'll most likely get devoured and poisoned by them. At the start of most encounters except for ambushes, you'll be able to position your heroes accordingly. However, similar to Expeditions Rome, you only have a small area at which you can move around, so make use of it wisely. Afterward, the actual combat will begin. On the right-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice that there are several objectives to accomplish to acquire extra XP and Cogni. These are not mandatory, but they're worth completing to make succeeding encounters manageable since you're able to progress and level up faster. And they also make combat much more challenging and fun. For instance, 2 objectives have you defeating an enemy with an obstacle as well as collecting an item from an obstacle. If you complete both, you'll receive 10 XP and 70 Cogni, on top of what you receive by default. Meanwhile, Cogni is used to decipher tomes via the scribe at camp, thereby granting access to passives which you wouldn't otherwise gain. Be mindful, though, that the AI in this game is smart. Sometimes they race you to complete one of your easier combat objectives, such as unlocking a treasure chest. In the encounters themselves, you'll have to maximize your positioning of your heroes to take less damage. For example, there was a scenario where Aurora had to swap places with an enemy using the Mystic Fog skill to avoid his telegraphed attack. Not only did she dodge, but this also at the same time made the enemy receive great damage as well. Another essential technique is to corner your targets using 2 or 3 heroes to execute team attacks which inflict massive damage. You can also backstab enemies for extra damage. The sooner they die, the better, especially if you have a lot of other cohorts to deal with. Remember that for every turn, each of your heroes has only 2 action points. They're then consumed when you move an attack. Similar to Expeditions Rome and Disciples' Liberation, you have the freedom to decide which among your characters will act first, giving you a distinct advantage. Additionally, not all enemies in the arena are aware of your presence, but they'll be alerted after 2 or 3 turns if you attack them. Next is improving your sense of environmental awareness based on the obstacles and hazards available in the encounter. This, coupled with your smart use of skills, will help keep you alive. In one instance, Aurora attacked a spiked flower, which resulted in hitting an icicle on the ground. This then inflicted chill against adjacent enemies, reducing their AP in the next turn by 1. There are so many combinations you can come up with that it reminds me ever so slightly of Larian Studios' fascination with environmental interactions in Divinity: Original Sin. In terms of Reverie Knights Tactics difficulty, you can select between normal or story mode. In the normal mode, your HP won't regenerate after each encounter, so you have to rely on potions and skills to improve survivability. It's also advisable to complete as many combat objectives as possible to level up quickly. This difficulty tier is highly recommended for experienced RPG players who intend to challenge themselves. Conversely, in the story mode, you'll be focusing on the plot rather than combat, where you'll regain your full health regardless of whether or not you leveled up. Looting comes in many forms. For instance, you can unlock treasure chests and attack obstacles in combat, which may provide you with items such as herbs for crafting. What Reverie Knights Tactics does differently, though, is to incentivize you to click as many items in the background as possible, those that you wouldn't otherwise select as valuable loot. For instance, some of the mushrooms you see are obtainable. Plus, it gives you time to appreciate the wonderful art of the game. Nowadays, this isn't as common in RPGs, where more often than not, pertinent items are shining, begging you to take notice of them. In the camp, which is also considered your haven, you'll be able to interact with NPCs to craft bombs and cook food. Bombs provide you with more options to damage and debilitate enemies, whereas food restores HP and mana, as well as removing status effects. Remember to keep coming back to them to replenish your stocks. Final thoughts. Reverie Knights Tactics revisits challenging combat mechanics of classic isometric turn-based RPGs while weaving fresh systems into them. Although this may be difficult for those who are unfamiliar with the genre due to the uneven learning curve, completing every encounter, including the combat objectives, feels very satisfying. It's also commendable to see the developers incorporate smart AI who equally take advantage of environmental hazards and obstacles to your detriment, making combat tougher but more fun. If you've been searching for a beautiful and interesting tactical turn-based RPG where the choices you make don't only impact the story but also the gameplay itself, then consider checking out Reverie Knights Tactics. You can use the link below to help support the channel if you're picking up the game on Steam. What do you find most appealing about Reverie Knights Tactics? Will you be playing the game at launch? Let us know in the comments below.